Well, joining me now is Jason Reed. Very good to see you. He's political commentator and UK lead at Young Voices. Very good to have you once again. Huge week for politics, isn't it?
It has been huge. You would be forgiven for thinking that the Partygate scandal was in the past now. Sue Gray has reported, the Metropolitan Police have concluded their investigation, but hot off the presses, as they say, just in the last few minutes, the Sunday Times has revealed that it has seen text about a party in the flat in number 10 from Carrie Johnson, or rather to Carrie Johnson, from a former aide, which supposedly these texts were not factored somehow into the...
So new evidence?
It does seem to be new evidence. The Sue Gray inquiry denies that it was ever, ignored evidence or anything like that, but it does seem that this was not taken into account. There were a lot of questions being asked already about why a fine was issued for the ambush by cake event, but...
but not the other ones?
Not the other ones, which were...
Because it wasn't wine. It wasn't wine. It just looked like wine.
It must have just looked like wine, apparently. But this is another event to that one you're referring to, in fact.
So in fact, this isn't going away at all, is it? And actually, Boris has really tried to move this on with Rishi's statement, handing out money left, right and centre, and then, of course, various other things that are going on. So they're desperately trying to move the agenda forward. Do you think they'll succeed?
I feel like eventually they will succeed, although it is taking a lot longer than we would have thought. We would have expected Partygate would have dropped off the news agenda by now. I didn't think we would still have new evidence emerging at this late stage, and number 10 having to go back on previous statements, because they previously flat out denied that this event ever took place.
Does anyone believe anything that comes out of number 10?
I think we lost the ability to believe anything that any government minister says a long time ago, when we had the back and forth on vaccine passports, which seems like a lifetime ago now, and on Partygate in particular, they've been economical with the truth, shall we say.
Well, let's say that. OK, what else have you got for us this morning?
An interesting statement from the Russian ambassador to the UK, who has said in an interview that Russia will not use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, and in fact has no plans to use any nuclear weapons at all at any time.
Despite actually putting them on high alert right at the beginning of the crisis?
Yes, once again, the words that come out of the Kremlin are very different to the actions that we see them implementing. Like, for example, they still deny that they have invaded Ukraine. They say it's a special military operation.
That's right.
We can all see with our eyes what's happening.
So what's behind this? Why is he saying this?
I think this is part of the ongoing humiliation of Russia's military. Of course, when the invasion first took place, they never explicitly mentioned nuclear weapons, but we remember Vladimir Putin talking a lot about anyone who interfered in Ukraine suffering the worst consequences they'd ever seen and they could possibly imagine.
Absolutely.
Which was widely interpreted to refer to nuclear weapons. But now they have failed to take Ukraine. They have had to scale back their ambitions in the war quite dramatically, and they're still failing in the Donbass regions in the east. And so it seems that they are running, back with their tail between their legs and having to roll back everything they did. It's a bit of damage limitation now.
I mean, the resolve from the Ukrainian people has been extraordinary. Yesterday we had a Ukrainian MP on this show, and it was amazing listening to her and sort of reliving it through her eyes. These are real people. This is happening in real time, and we feel slightly removed from it. What's your feeling in terms of how Russia will now progress? Because clearly they are making gains in the east of the country, in those two areas. But do you feel that this is now... it will be then sort of ring-fenced, and I suppose Putin will then say mission accomplished, rather like George Bush once did?
Quite possibly. I think there's a bit of a power dynamic shift going on, because at the very beginning, Putin was very much the man in charge, making all of the calls and acting in, a lot of the time, a very irrational way. But now that we've had even Russian state TV calling attention to some of the failures of what's going on in Ukraine, drawing parallels to Afghanistan, I think there's other voices within the Kremlin that are starting to speak up and say, look, if we want to preserve Russia's long-term ambitions, we need to cut our losses, we need to start thinking about a way out from this, because it's not going to be the victory.
Emma is itching to say something, aren't you?
I am. It seems to me obvious that the reason why they may be saying this now is for strategic reasons. If we say that our own government are economical with the truth, and I don't know what we would say about the Russians, but given that at Davos we've seen Henry Kissinger coming out and saying that essentially we should hand over territory in Ukraine like the Sudetenland. It really is a case of appeasement, and I think that actually one of the problems that the Russians have is that they have burnt all of their bridges to retreat across. across, and in doing so they're actually making it more likely that there will be a favourable approach to them ceding some territory to the Russians if they come out and say, after we've seen, you know, cases of genocide and so on, if we see that they are saying we're not going to use nukes in Ukraine, then perhaps there would be a more favourable public opinion across Europe towards the idea that Henry Kissinger is proposing, which I think is straightforward appeasement. It's exactly
well, of course it is.
Out of the playbook.
It is, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think it's, you know, it's just unacceptable.
It's a good point, and I don't think it makes the appeasement, as you call it, any more likely. Do you think it does? Because I think this is nowhere near enough to change anyone's minds in Europe and think, oh, all right, then I suppose we'll give them some of what they're asking for.
Well, have a bit of our land.
Well, I would like to have thought that would have been in the case anyway. I'm surprised that someone like Henry Kissinger is coming out and suggesting that we should be handing over territory to the Russians, which will only encourage them to expand even more. So, given that he is somebody who's done a PhD in history and should really know better, I don't think that we should really give world leaders much credit when it comes to whether or not they're actually going to be able to see through the Russian fabrication of this.
Let's move on. Imperial measurements, we talked about it with Ryan earlier on. Your thoughts?
I think this is fantastic. I think that we forgot, in a way, to explore some of the benefits of Brexit because we were hung up with so long with the parliamentary impasse, and then we talked about COVID and nothing else for 2 years. Indeed, thank you very much, David.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bringing us back imperial measurements. You know. As the government says, you know, we already measure our beer and our milk in pints. There's no reason at all to be clinging on to these European restrictions about banana straightening and goodness knows what else. There's a whole bucket full of different restrictions that we can now look at and make British law pretty.
Is this an attempt, though, to move on the agenda?
Quite possibly, but you can say that about anything. Let's enjoy it while, you know, the good story comes along.
OK, let's talk about Wakefield. 2 by-elections coming up. Wakefield, very interesting constituency. I have to be a bit careful what I say now because I have a political hat on. But Wakefield by-elections, your thoughts on this? Clearly a test for the government.
It is very much a test for the government, and people are now looking to the next general election. Some rumours that it might happen next year, but it seems likely it still might be in 2024, which is not as far away as you think, 2 years away. And so this is going to be a real...
It feels it.
It does feel, that's true, but it'll come along quicker than you think. This is going to be a real indication of what will happen and just how big the jumps are going to be, in particular in the Liberal Democrat vote in some of those Tory heartlands, and of course...
Well, I'd agree about Tiverton, but I think from what I hear in Wakefield, they're not there. That's what I've heard. I've heard that the Tories are not there. I've heard Labour's there, and other parties that I might know about are there. But you know, what's your sense? If you're a betting man, what's going to happen in Wakefield?
I think you're right. I think Labour have kind of got this informal pact going with the Lib Dems, where they've established that one seat is likely to go Lib Dem in Devon, and the other one is more likely to go to Labour. And so maybe that's a precursor of what's going to happen in the election as well, if they realise they can hold hands and gain a few more seats.
And do you think people are still engaged? My worry is people won't vote.
I think this is a real issue. There's such an issue with trust in politics and trust in institutions, as you were alluding to earlier, that people just aren't enthused anymore. And if people are going to vote, they're going to vote to keep out people they really don't like, rather than to put people in who they're really supportive and passionate about.
Jason, thank you so much. It's a pleasure once again to see you. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching Talk TV with me, David Bull. Don't you dare go anywhere.